What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Yes, this is a 4:45 show. Apparently, I accidentally scheduled it for 5:45, even though I scheduled it about 6 minutes ago. Just a misclick, just a dumbass. Hopefully people will get the notice. I just revised it and changed it and kicked it out there. We are live right now to talk about a 8-game NBA DFS slate. My name's Terry McBride. Site is rotoscouts.com. Cujo's here. Hope your day's going well too, pal. We'll see who else turns up. Hopefully that didn't screw us up. Also a late show, also a short notice show. Still waiting on a DraftKings sim to finish up here. That's why you got some blanks on the DK side of the board here. Just ran everything, so that means I'm sure we're going to get a gigantic piece of news on this already messy slate in the next couple of minutes, and it'll change everything we're about to talk about. Sim's finished. We're just waiting on the creation of the board and the results now, so it'll just be another minute before we get that loaded up. But welcome to everybody who's here. Hit the like button as we get started. I'm sure more people will trickle in, but it'll probably be another smaller show. I'm going to get this wrangled back to at least a more reasonable schedule like what we're on prior to the holidays. It's been a bit messy the last couple of days. It just took me forever today, for whatever reason, to project this slate. I was on it relatively early, for me and for when the information becomes available. And just with a lot of insy-outsy stuff and a lot of unknowns that we're waiting on, still waiting on some of the big pieces of news. Just took forever. Fortunately, the NHL is only a 3-gamer today. Calgary was supposed to be in Los Angeles to play the Kings, and they had to cancel that one, obviously, due to the LA fires. And I was wondering about it. I posted it as a question on Twitter, and I sent it to some of my friends in our text chain. I don't know that, and this isn't to make light, obviously, of the situation in LA. Hopefully people are okay and have evacuated and gotten out of the way of those terrible fires and everything. But I think this might be the first time a pro sports game has been postponed for the same reason of one of the team's names, Calgary Flames. It's kind of weird. Got some suggestions of other things. Apparently a Miami Hurricanes game was canceled by a hurricane. That's not a pro sport. Some other weird suggestions in here. I haven't seen anything legit yet. I think this might be the first time. But anyway, let's talk basketball. We've got a few people in the room already. I'm sure more people will get here in the next few minutes. Let me actually send that, and I'm just going to quote tweet myself. This is live now. Original schedule was wrong by an hour on the YouTube video. All right. Hopefully that'll get some people's attention. Anyway, diving on in, it is an interesting slate. We've already got some ins and outs that we've known kind of all day, with some pretty critical news that's thrusting a guy like Tyrese Maxey up to the top of the board. We've got Kawhi Leonard is stepping away from his from the team to be with his family due to the LA fires today for the Clips. The Clips are in Denver, so there's no impact from the actual emergency on the game. But Kawhi Leonard's not going to play today, so we got him out of the projections during the day. But starting up at the top of the board, the Bulls and the Pacers. Pacers favored by 6 in a home game. 242.5 point total in that one. Pretty juicy on both sides as far as the game environment goes. We'll see what we got from either of those teams. I would expect at worst we're going to get some of those guys sliding in for solid fillers from the mid-range. Looks like Andrew Nembhard came up somewhat on FanDuel, but below the field as I'm glancing at the board here. So definitely some pieces and parts at the worst from that one, and could honestly surprise a little bit and just deliver value out of that game total in just the big, pacey kind of environment. The Wizards and the Sixers, one with everybody's attention today. All of the Sixers are out except for Maxey. He's going to look great just basically across the board today, pulling ownership in more than half of all lineups on both sites. It looks like we're going to get a ton of them. On the Wizards side, still some missing pieces for them as well that create at least a little bit of value around that team. They're 11-point dogs. It's a 221-point total. It's not an ideal environment, and it's amazing that Philly, that's how bad the Wizards are. Philly's still that big a favorite, even with Embiid out, with Paul George out, Kyle Lowry out, and so on and so forth. So Ugly opponent. I do think the Wiz can hang a little bit better than that. We were talking about it for a minute in Discord before. I think it was VA Prince was asking, I consider Harden now with Kawhi out. My answer was no, because there's multiple impacts there. I had Kawhi at like 22 minutes anyway, so the impact would have been negligible as far as his impact on Harden's upside. Harden does look a little bit better than he had been, and still looks fine and playable. But by comparison to Maxey, he doesn't compare. They're offset by 4 or 5 points. It is a significantly better situation for Maxey, and I think you just want to ride that chalk. You don't necessarily want to go away from it. So looks like a great play. OKC against Cleveland, game of the night, 230.5 point total there. Cleveland favored by 2.5. Both teams just absolutely rolling. Super talented teams on both sides. Good defense on both sides, but a very solid game total. At worst, I think we can take parts from that game. I don't know if anybody's going to rocket toward the top of the board as like an absolute priority. It should be an is who they is kind of a situation, or who they are kind of a situation. Is who he is situation for every individual play within that game, while all still looking playable in that sense. Detroit, Brooklyn. Brooklyn 9-point dogs at home, 213-point total. The ugliest game of the day by a wide margin. Detroit, with the new configuration of that team and missing a couple pieces, we could end up mining some of the odds and ends there, but there's so much value already on the slate. I think they fall by the wayside. Same deal with the Nets. They're just so bad. We're getting mediocre players that do get minutes, but it's not the best pool of players. I don't imagine they're going to be jumping to the top of the board for value, but there are missing bodies there, so there will be a large void of minutes and shot taking at least to fill, not necessarily any shot making. The Raptors in MSG to play the Knicks. Knicks favored by 12, 230-point total there. Karl Anthony Towns, Deuce McBride, both questionable to play. I'm leaning towards Cats in with a 12-point spread, but I'm not sure. I don't like to play that guessing game all that much. We know what the impact for both of those players being out pretty much looks like. Could have emergent value on the Knicks. Otherwise, Knicks starters and maybe some odds and ends. It's a revenge game if you like chasing those things for Quickly and RJ Barrett. Scotty at the top of the board for Toronto. Basically, the big three for Toronto and the Knicks starters are probably what we're going to want unless something changes. Portland and the Pellies. Pellies missing a few pieces. Zion not playing the back-to-back. Looked pretty good last night, gotta say. Not a big Zion fan, but nice to see him out there, pulling off 360 dunks and stuff. Granted, it was completely undefended, and he was lumbering his way down the court to get the ball, but we'll take it. Pellies are favored by 1.5 in a home game, 225-point total there. The Clips and Denver, again, no Kawhi here, just a 1.5-point game. Denver's a 1.5-point dog. Did we lose Jokic? I haven't seen it yet. No, I'm on the wrong... Gotta get to my injuries post. So, Jokic is questionable. I hadn't registered that was that low. Was that low when I put it in? Yeah, so Denver 2-point dogs to the Clips at home when I put it together, and it just didn't completely register in my brain. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, Jokic is a monster piece. I think you can go back to Denver value around the Dario Saric's of the world if Jokic doesn't play. I would just rather have Jokic. And then on the Clippers side, odds and ends around Harden and Normie Powell, I'm sure will look at least decent again with no Kawhi there, but I don't know that we prioritize either of them. And then kind of a big game to end the slate. San Antonio at Milwaukee, obviously some upside pieces among the stars in that one. 5-point favorites at home from Milwaukee, 227.5-point total there. Not a bad game. I don't mind ending the slate with that one. I'd like to have some flexibility open for that. As far as the ins and outs go, so Kawhi not with the Clippers today due to the fires. Jamal Cain is available. Giannis is probable. Andre Jackson is probable. Chris Middleton is probable. That takes care of the Bucks. Questionables. Tyrese Halliburton. That's kind of a big one. Him and Miles Turner. I'd forgotten that they were questionable. Obviously, that would open up some stuff for Indy against Chicago in that pacey, loose kind of a game. So definitely one to watch there. Sam Merrill, Isaac Okoro, Bub Carrington, Kyle Kuzma, Alex Sarr, Andre Drummond, Day'Ron Sharp, Karl Anthony Towns, Deuce McBride, Denny Avdija, Donovan Clingan, DeJounte Murray, and Nikola Jokic, all questionable. Obviously, some big names there. If the two Knicks are out or one or the other, we kind of know what it looks like I said before. Denny doesn't play. That's kind of a big downstream impact for them. If Andre Drummond doesn't play, it opens up more for Philly. Same deal with both of Kuzma and Alex Sarr for Washington. Merrill and Okoro, more minor impact, but Halliburton and Turner would be massive impacts if they don't play or if even one of them doesn't play. So a lot of moving parts still to deal with on this slate. And then there's a million guys already out. Torrey Craig, Ayo Dosunmu, Isaiah Jackson, Aaron Nesmith, James Wiseman, Alex Caruso. Ousmane Dieng is with the G League team. I have seen him pick up projections here and there. And I thought that meant he was going to be with the team. So keep an eye on that. If he pops up with the team, 4 to 6 minutes, I think, would be maybe appropriate. But as of the last injury report, he was still with the G League team. So I've got him out. Marvin Bagley III, Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Johnny Davis, Jordan Poole, Joel Embiid, Paul George, Kyle Lowry, KJ Martin, Jared McCain, Jaden Ivey, Aja Thompson, Bojan Bogdanovic, Cam Johnson, Max Lewis, DeAnthony Melton, D'Angelo Russell. Ben Simmons is doubtful. Cam Thomas, Trenton Watford, Derek Whitehead. There's all your Nets. Mitch Robinson, Jeremy Grant, Matisse Thybulle, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, there's your Pellies. Kawhi Leonard, PJ Tucker, Vlatko Konkar, Aaron Gordon, and Jeremy Sohan is out for the Spurs. That creates a little bit of value. We've seen that recently. So a lot of dudes already out. A lot of known knowns. A lot of known unknowns. To Rumsfeld, it's the unknown unknowns you got to watch out for. Cujo's, said hi to Cujo already. Mamba's here. Mamba's calling for a win. Maybe he'll change the logo to help the Scouts Nation. Go for it, buddy. Appreciate that. Anybody who wants to grab it, it's available. And I've said it before. I'll carve you out some kind of a prize. I don't know what it'll be. I don't have like a program set up or anything, but like I can kick out 3 weeks with the best of them for people who spread the logo around. Andy's here. What's up, Andy? So let me grab the DraftKings sim. I'm sure it's done by now. Apologies for making you guys stare at those X's that whole time. Relatively confident that Mr. Maxey's going to be pretty significantly owned. Let's see what else we got. Oops. We are slightly below the field, actually, on Maxey on both sites. On FanDuel, we're at 74% and a little bit below the field. That's crazy, but appropriate. I think you can take as much Maxey as you want in this situation. He takes a nice rate bump. You can give him credit for more because they're playing such a god-awful team. So 47%, we're a little bit below the field. I believe was around 50 on the DraftKings slate. And where was the field on FanDuel? Oh, the point I was going to make before about Maxey too with the blowout, I trailed off on the point that I was making there. I don't know that Philly blows out Washington in this game, in this situation, if Maxey doesn't get there. And that was kind of the concern. That was the response to, like, why would you want to go away from Maxey in this spot? It was, well, they're 11-point favorites. They might blow out a really bad DC team. But I think that almost entirely hinges on Maxey getting his. Like, yeah, Kelly Oubre's okay. But, I mean, outside of Maxey, like, who's going to go out there and blow out that DC team? That collection of players is not that much better than that DC team if you scratch Tyrese Maxey. Kelly Oubre, Yabu's been all right. Caleb Martin's a bad player. Bad for our purposes, not a good scorer, low usage guy is kind of my point here. If I say bad player, I don't necessarily mean he's a bad NBA player, right? So apologies to Caleb Martin. Eric Gordon, Andre Drummond, sure, he'll be able to do whatever he wants, but is that going to lead to them, that means rebounding mostly. Is that going to lead to a blowout victory? Reggie Jackson, Ricky Council, this is not a team of world beaters outside of Tyrese Maxey. So if Philly is going to blow out Washington, Tyrese is probably going to get his, and I don't think you worry about it. I think it's just great looking chalk from a very, very good player. He's one of the legit 30% usage guys on the board today. I wouldn't be surprised if it looked more like 40% today. He's going to be the engine for this offense, and he's going to play basically the entire game. So I think he's absolutely mandatory, at least to like these levels. And again, we are a little bit below the field on both sides. That's one I wouldn't mind seeing a position above the field on, though. I think he's that good a play. Kelly Oubre, nearly 50% of all lineups coming out of the same situation at 5,900. Shooting guard, small forward. Shooting guard only on DraftKings. Same deal. We got him 45% of the time essentially on both sites. We are below the field on both. Looks like a harder undercut to the field on the FanDuel slate, but a big, big chunk of them. I don't mind having him around that level, but since we're taking such a big undercut, we could also draw it back even further. If there's situations where we want to exploit it, maybe take advantage of some other opportunities. Like a few spots down on the FanDuel slate, and it's a different play from site to site. We have Tyrese Martin from Brooklyn. If you were here the other day. 65% in our FanDuel lineups because he's only 4,800 with the same positioning as what Kelly Oubre has for 5,900. There's going to be a ton of lineups that have both of those dudes in them. But if you were paring this down further, if you said, all right, if the field's getting a ton of Oubre and I want to get away from it already, I can take that down to, conservatively 35, maybe even 40%, and still create a little bit of a gap there that you can throw into more Martin shares. And then you've got $1,100 to spend elsewhere and upgrade another spot to make up any perceived gap, for which there really isn't one given the point per dollar of it. They're essentially the same. And Oubre is projected for 35 minutes. If you gave Martin those extra minutes, they'd be projected essentially equally, 0.83 versus 0.82 per minute on FanDuel, favoring Tyrese Martin. They're more equal on the DraftKings slate. Martin's 4,600 over there, shooting guard, small forward. Oubre only shooting guard. So we're just getting a little bit of Tyrese Martin. He's coming up ahead of the field on the DraftKings slate. Not sure why he's not coming up a little bit more than that, honestly. 6.25 value score is fantastic. 4.6K. Maybe he's just getting boxed out by some of this Brandon Boston, who's at a very different price from site to site. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is also taking up a ton of shares on DraftKings because he's only 3,000. Not really relevant at 3,600 on FanDuel. We did get a couple shares of him. But some interesting ones at the top of the board here. Let's get a little organized. We'll cut by some positions. We'll talk through it. Let me look at Boston real quick. That's a decent jump above the field on DraftKings on Brandon Boston. He's really not a play on FanDuel very much. Sub 5 value score by a pretty wide margin. 4,700 shooting guard only. We did get him in a few shares, but that's more odds and ends than anything else. Got him right at his average minutes. He averages 25 technically. He played 25 in the last one. I've got him at 24. You can give him another minute if you really want to force him. At 3,400 on DraftKings, he's coming up. That's a pretty significant value. 0.90 per minute for the season. I'm giving him credit for a little bit more than that here against Portland. Not much, 5/100ths of a fantasy point per minute. I think that's justifiable with a close point spread, 225 point total, and just all the missing bodies. DeJounte Murray comes off the board. It opens up just another void of minutes and ownership for this Pelicans team. So I can get behind that a little bit. DraftKings, again, that's Not double the ownership, but it's aggressively above. You could take a little bit less than that and spread it around, but at 3,400, that's just a reasonably good building block if he plays his just usual complement of minutes. He can disappoint. In the 25 minutes he put up the other day, he put up a 14.8 FanDuel score. That's not going to get it done. But 0.90 per minute for 3,400 over 34 minutes would certainly, or over 24 minutes would definitely get it done. Here's your Harden play. So, Prince, if you're watching, we did get Harden 40% on FanDuel, 28% on DraftKings at 8,600. He's not a play. Going to be out there doing his thing, 1.31 per minute on DraftKings. It's just Maxey does look better. But yeah, I can get to some Harden here. I think it's justifiable. 1.31 per minute DK, 1.25 per minute FanDuel this season. We're back to the no Kawhi situation where he's just going to, and again, Kawhi was only at 20 some odd minutes, 22 minutes in the original projections anyway. But whatever minutes they were going to play together, that impact is not going to be there. And Harden's ownership has ticked up. He's in the 20% range on DraftKings. We're a little bit ahead of that. Norm Powell can't be far behind here. He's actually right next to him. 20% of Norm, a little bit below the field on DraftKings. So again, both those guys just kind of benefit from rate upticks and expectations and having to do a little bit more. And they've been good by and large this season, but you can miss with both of those players on any given night pretty easily. But Harden last time out, 37.4, put up a 51. 33 and change out of Norm Powell in 38 minutes their last game. That's not ideal. It's okay. You can get by with that score in your lineup, but you obviously want Norm more around his 1.05. That would have put him into the 40s. Both guys in the mix on FanDuel, but on both sites we are getting less than the field on Norm Powell. 5.31 value on FanDuel, though. The value's there. 5.61 on DraftKings. The value's there. Just there's so much of it around the slate, and I promise you there's more coming. Speaking of, let's reload. See what's going on. Still Thursday news at the top of the board. It's a good sign. Yeah, that's those are two critical pieces for sure, Mama. Especially given that game environment. Turner and Halliburton. Absolutely. And it's nice. It's nice if we don't get Halliburton that we kind of do have a good inkling of like the direct beneficiaries. And I think, as usual, the guy I'm most excited about in that situation is probably TJ McConnell with his just monster per minute numbers. Right now, he doesn't look like much, but I've got him specifically flagged. And then, I haven't looked at the actual rate upticks yet, but Siakam would get a rate uptick. And then those mid guys would look just kind of better. The Nemhards, Shepards, Matherins of the world. So I do think there's nice opportunity created by that. And then if Turner doesn't play, all hell breaks loose. So if we have both of those guys out, it's going to be just utter pandemonium with value on essentially every team on this slate. There were at least a good number of them. So there's potential for chaos on this slate in the next hour and a half. Lou Dort, 4% on FanDuel, but looking like a solid piece. Different price by 1,000 across sites. Multi-position eligible on both. We're getting 20% of them with a solid 6 value score on DraftKings for our 4,000. That's not bad. Lou Dort, pretty rock solid minutes. Good player, gets his hands on the ball. Just not a great high usage type. Not a great per minute guy. A better NBA player than he is a fantasy player. But he can get you there. 6.07 on the value scale, too. For 4,000, he doesn't really have to do much to get you there. He was solidly on that number just the other day, 38.8 minutes. He got 25.7 FanDuel points. Does that thrust you on its own into a winning position? No. But is that playable at 4,000? Sure. You want a little bit more than that, but you need 3 and change points more than that, maybe 4. If you get 6 points more than that, he's crazy value. So highly, highly playable piece. Just a rotational guy. I mean, he's not one of the top options on the slate, and it's a challenging game environment. But definitely a rotational piece and pulling a very, very good DraftKings value. Quickly, looking like a huge piece on FanDuel. 5.80 value. 51% of our FanDuel lineups and well above the field. 19% skewed above the field, but not a straight line directly up. Is a little bit more interesting for the public on DraftKings. 67 on FanDuel, point guard and shooting guard eligibility. That'll get you there. 68 point guard only. You can see why he falls off a little bit on DraftKings, but still looking like a good piece on both sites. I have no issues going to quickly. We're well above our value threshold on DraftKings, and we're well above our DraftKings value threshold on FanDuel, which is great. 1.05 per minute in the 6 games he's played, 27 minutes a night, 1.09 on DraftKings. Again, if you're a believer in revenge, the only spot that I'll even consider discussing revenge, like when we get to baseball and everything, it's just laughable because it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to hit a home run just because you want to. But in basketball, particularly around guards who are going to be able to have the ball in their hands, high volume guys who are going to be able to decide, I'm going to take more shots because I want to. It's the one spot I will consider the notion of revenge. Does Emmanuel quickly hit the Knicks? I don't think so. Has he had an opportunity already? Pretty sure. But it's in the mix, right? You can see that from time to time because these guys do call their own numbers. They do call their own plays. So that's the one spot, again, that I'll consider it as a narrative. It's not in the projections. I would never tweak projections for it, but I'll consider discussing it on shows. And could Emmanuel quickly be that guy? Sure, why not? Is he going to be? Does that mean anything in the long run? No. That's why I don't project it. It's also impossible to quantify. It's just a thing. $4,900 Cason Wallace looks exactly like Lou Dort on FanDuel, and it's probably going to be true of all the OKC guys I would expect. They're all just priced correctly on the FanDuel slate for the mediocre per minute numbers that they put up for being very, very good NBA players that play 30-plus minutes. So there's just a bit of a crunch around those guys, and on DraftKings, it looks like universally priced down by about $1,000. So $3,700 Cason Wallace looked pretty good on DK. We got him essentially the same as Lou Dort because he's essentially the same play. Point guard, shooting guard eligible, a 6.39 value score, technically a higher value score than than 3,700. Nope, sorry. Technically 0.04 lower. I was looking up at $4,000 Norm Powell. It's silly though, I mean, on DraftKings right now. We've got $3,400 there, 46 there, 4,000 there, 37 there. 34 there. Look at all these absurd values already, and we're not nearly done with getting the news. This slate is stupid. Oh, man. I'm not looking forward to this one. It's fine to play. I'm looking forward to playing it. I'm not looking forward to 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Washington, Philly, Chicago, Indy tip at 7. So does OKC, Cleveland. Toronto, New York tips at 7:30. So does Detroit, Brooklyn. Portland and New Orleans tips at 8. And then we've got an hour to chill for a little bit. Maybe find some dinner. Crack a beer. Not sure if my buddy Charlie's coming over tonight. I just realized it was Wednesday. Anyway, you guys don't care about any of that. What about some Cade Cunningham? 2% on FanDuel, not getting us there. 10,100 on the FanDuel slate. He's 9,800, point guard only on both sites. He's an excellent player, 1.32 per minute. One of the true 30% plus usage guys on the entire slate going up against an inept Brooklyn team. I have no issues getting to Cade if you can on either site. He is easily into that tier of guys, and especially against this Brooklyn squad, he's into that tier of guys that you can take more shares of on any given slate. But the way that he's priced and the way the position's falling today, FanDuel, you're nowhere near, and we're well off the field. The field might still be sub 10 or around 10 given that difference, but we're well below the field there. We do have 16% on DraftKings, but that's a pretty significant undercut, it looks like, to the DraftKings ownership. Let's see what this ran against. So it's like low 20s. It's not crazy far off, which I guess is reflected in that shading. It's fun playing this game of trying to interpret the shading down to like tenths and hundredths of a percentage point sometimes. But that's not a huge gap. I wouldn't mind taking Cade up to the field. The challenge would be The challenge would be getting him above the field. As usual, I would rather have a position on every player or on most players than just having like this where I'm essentially level, or like more to the point if there's a yellow one that's like that. There's not an immediate yellow one. But getting him above the field from there, you'd have to get to like 30 plus, and that would be challenging because you'd be sacrificing a lot of other value squares through that. Or you'd be sacrificing Maxey squares. You'd be sacrificing some Harden. Is he a reasonable pivot from those guys? Sure. That's obvious in a point per minute sense. But he's also priced that way. Stephon Castle, 2% on FanDuel. Not really looking all that relevant. No Sohan again. That's the missing piece for San Antonio. He played 25 and change, I think, the last time Sohan was out. So there wasn't like a big uptick for him. I've seen him more highly projected around sites, though. He is pulling some DraftKings ownership. 16% on DK. He's yet another $3,000 guy that fits into the guard spots. It's essentially free guards day on DraftKings, it looks like, and I'm sure that continues on across other positions. Light, friendly pricing on DraftKings today. But at 0.86 per minute, at 3,400, he can pay those bills. It's a 6.35 in the value column. Right? So he plays right alongside the 6.39 from the OKC guys, or the 6+ from the OKC guys. Look how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 guards with a 6+ value score. There's another 3, 4 at 5.75 or higher. This slate is dumb. Shaden Sharp, we're getting a little bit of FanDuel ownership back. 19% on the blue site, 15% on DraftKings. 0.89 per minute FanDuel, 0.92 per minute DraftKings. Kind of is who he is spot. Right? We've basically been seeing this. If we get some of those Portland guys ruled out, though, that could definitely open things up. So it's yet another spot to watch. Do I still have that one open? I don't. If we get no Denny, I can see just, things, they're just being more available for the Sharps and Scoots and Simonses of the world. So, another one to watch. But right now, looks like a playable part, but we are below the field on both sides. He is a 5+ value on FanDuel right now, though. 5.78 on DraftKings. It's well above our value threshold on both sites. Just falls short of so many of the other values. Look at the DraftKings value column in just the shading. Just look at the color of that versus the color of the FanDuel value column. That's how differently priced these slates are. That's how poorly priced this DraftKings slate is. FanDuel got it right. This is what it should look like. There should be a couple values on the slate. There should be a couple surprises that open up values for, $3,000 and $4,000 guys. You shouldn't have all of Oklahoma City's starters priced in the 3,000s. That's ridiculous. DraftKings is just trying to make the game too easy. It's too user-friendly. Or maybe too easy is the wrong way to put it, but they're catering to the idea of just people want to mash stars into their lineup. And they're letting their pricing slip. And doesn't do good things for the game. Russ, definitely going to look interesting if there's no Jokic. Already looks interesting. 15% on FanDuel, level with the field, 5.41 value score, 5.88 on DraftKings where everything's free, 14% and above the field. Things go up if there's no Jokic, so just, yet again, keep an eye on that spot. Jamal Murray would also get a bump in that situation. It's more minor than Russ's, if memory serves from last night. MPJ has been weird in that situation with no Jokic this year. You saw the fallout around the bigs where Saric started, but I think played 17-ish minutes. DeAndre played like 20 minutes. I believe that's a season high. But I think that Russ, just given his point per minute excellence and mid-board pricing, at least becomes more interesting up into, and would be like up in this territory if we had the Jokic news already. You guys are probably screaming something at me. Let me pull it up. Halliburton in. Turner is out. That's fun. What kind of a sample of Turner out do we have? Handful of people here watching. Again, late notice show. Late scheduled show. Got to get on the ball with getting these things in front of you guys a little bit sooner. All right. No Turner. Get back to Indy here. Probably shouldn't be just diving into figuring out Indy right now, given that it's 5:25 already and we're only on 3/4 of the way through the guards. Let's see. No. And there's no Naismith. There's no Jacksons. There's no Johnson. There's no Wiseman. Yeah, this is going to take too long to set up on Wowie. I'm going to skip it. Keep an eye, obviously, on some of the indie bigs. The situation's going to change around them. But with Hallie in, then you're not going to get Bryant as starting. All right. That was what I was figuring. But I don't have anything about the rates in front of me. But Bryant goes from 9 minutes to presumably, I'll have to look if that's happened yet. But I would probably say lowish 20s and then kind of a spread. And I got to see who else out of the big men are even available. And then other guys with any kind of size will pick up little bumps, like Obi will pick up a couple of minutes and go into probably the mid-20s. So we'll break that down, and it'll be in the projections, and just follow the numbers. But Bryant costs... Where'd he go? There he is. $3,200. Good news. There's another $3,000 piece on the board for you on DraftKings. He's $39 on FanDuel. He's center only on FanDuel, which would have a potential impact in how much you're going to even want of him, depending on what we end up projecting him at. The 32 on DraftKings, I would imagine, even if I give him like 18 minutes, it's going to put him on the board. He's been playing at 102 FanDuel, 1.0 DraftKings over his 21 games is 11.5 minutes a night. I just really, the minutes upside is going to be the question mark and the limiting factor in what he's going to be able to go do. Jarris Walker will pick up a little bit. So all these, anybody who's big down in this territory, and then I got to check if any of the the bigs that I didn't originally project are even active. And then we'll get that sorted. But yeah, Bryant's going to be one to watch, given that he's around a point per minute guy, and he's going to play presumably at least 18 minutes. Let's clean up the end of guards, and then we'll jump to forwards. I'll put forwards and centers on the board together again. I think that's just going to be the way I do it from now on. But we're down into this territory, so with all the weight going in up here, this does thin out pretty quickly. But we do have a distribution of shares across a lot of very good players through here. We talked about Jamal Murray in Denver. Obviously, we're watching Jokic. Josh Giddey, from Chicago with missing pieces of Chicago right next to Andrew Nembhard on the other side of that game and Ben Mathurin on the other side of that game, and 2 spots further down, Tyrese Halliburton, who we now know is playing. All of those guys came up as onesie, twosie shares, 10% or so or below on DraftKings, but we have shares of everybody. 11% Giddey, 10% Nembhard, 9% Mathurin, 9% SGA, not in that game, but relevant to the slate, 7% Tyrese Halliburton. I would not be against taking more shares or fewer shares of any one of those guys. They're obviously very differently scaled and differently priced. It's kind of up and down the board price-wise. But I think all of those guys at worst are who they are situations. And the Chicago Indy game is particularly interesting just given the total and the pace being quite a bit higher than everybody else's. So interesting pieces that don't really crush for, obvious must-have value. But any of those pieces could be a part of a winning lineup. So they're well worth considering. All of them are well over 5. Some of them are over our 5.5 value threshold, like Nembhard at 5.69. The rest of these guys, close enough. Good enough for government work. On FanDuel, some of them are a little bit more relevant, but coming up a little bit lighter than the field, like Josh Giddey at 17%. We're getting a little bit more in the raw sense, but against the field, that's a little bit less. 5.25 value score, well over our threshold. 7,000 at both guard spots. Nembhard 52 at both guard spots. Same value score, 14%, same exact situation. We're a little bit below the field. Part of that's probably just because we're sinking so much into these two. So if you're drawing those guys down, you've got reasonable pivot points. But I kind of like following the numbers on some under-owned plays by the field on a couple of those guys. For the rest of those guys, it basically looks like it does on DraftKings, where it's a few shares here, a few shares there. More of any one of those guys, perfectly fine. Now we're down into the dregs as far as ownership goes, but still very good players. I would never call Jalen Brunson the dregs, especially as a big Knicks fan. 4.67% exposed in our top 150 on DraftKings. He's a 5+ value, but we're looking for 5.5. 9,100. Kind of an is who he is spot for Jalen. Does go up and get more interesting if Karl Anthony Towns doesn't play. Definitely more for Jalen to do in that situation. Loses one of his big completers of assists, but has plenty of other guys. As we've discussed before on recent shows, there is a direct impact rate uptick for Josh Hart, rate uptick for OG Anunoby. Mikal Bridges would just automatically become more interesting, even though his rate stays about the same if there's no Karl Anthony Towns. And then if Towns doesn't go, you get the obvious, Jericho Sims probably starts again. You get something from him. I still kind of prefer Precious. Forget what the minutes ended up looking like the other day, but Precious is easily the better NBA player between those guys. But that would be one where you just keep an eye on who's starting or what Precious's minutes look like. But if we don't get that situation, Brunson's at worst always playable. On FanDuel, looks a little bit better. He is above our value threshold. He's only 8,800 on the FanDuel slate, 1.16 per minute on the FanDuel scale this year. That is down from his production last year. The usage is down a little bit. He's got a better team to work with this year. So, yeah, production for fantasy slipping a little bit, but he's still very, very good, and the prices come down with it. We're below the field with a solid value score. I wouldn't mind more shares, but I don't know that I would chase the field up to like 20% or anything. And again, always like to have a position rather than just be level. Devin Vassell, mix and match piece on both sites. We're getting 20% of Keon Johnson, another guy coming up differently from Brooklyn on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings. 2% on DraftKings. We're getting 10 times that on FanDuel, but we're below the field. 5.26 on the value scale, over 32 minutes for 5,500. He's fine, but I really don't like many of these nets. He's a 0.78 per minute performer, and on 20% usage, you ought to be better than that. Typically, you're seeing 16% usage for these 0.7 guys, 17%. That's a 0.83 guy is 11%, 13%. Right? Usually when a guy gets this many shots, and he was better last year by a little, but he's not a good player. That is not somebody I really want to go out of my way for. I'll take what I get. If it's 1 in 5, so be it. I'd rather have like 1 in 7, but he's on the board. 5.26 value score is above our threshold, but even on FanDuel, where it's correctly priced, we do have many, many options to work with that are above our 5 value threshold. It's just not quite what DraftKings is today. DeJounte Murray mix and match piece if he plays, helps his teammates get better if he doesn't as far as our purposes for DFS rates. Mikal Bridges, 11%. Like I said, that goes up a little bit if there's no cat, but probably would just be chasing the field up the ladder for a little bit more. 2% on DraftKings. Mikal is very, very good. He's played a lot better over the last month and a half. The number's still at 0.78 for the season, but I'm confidently giving him a little bit more than that on most slates lately, and he hasn't really burnt us. Zaire Williams, mix and match piece, 4%, 2%, 8% of CJ. If DeJounte Murray doesn't play, that goes up a little bit, I would assume. 1% on DraftKings. I don't think CJ is going to get to any kind of territory where he's competing with any of these guys. But as a mix and match guy with, at least reasonable expectations of upside, he's fine. Same deal with Zach LaVine, 3% FanDuel. Malik Beasley at 6% FanDuel. Obviously, Beasley is a very different player than those guys. But he's playing around 30 minutes right now. Just with all the missing pieces. He's a 0.85 per minute guy. Not my favorite player to get to. I tend to think of Beasley more as this guy than that guy. But he'll take his shots. When they're there, he's going to take them. So no issues with a few shares of Beasley, but I'd rather be in those, those low single digits and below the field rather than having a big position on him. 7% of Mitchell at 8,400 in that great OKC Cleveland game. You didn't get him on DraftKings, but if you want to watch that game and enjoy it from a DFS sense, maybe you grab a share or two. He's always fine to take. Donovan Mitchell's excellent, but not really mathing out properly for us today. Scotty Barnes, Chris Paul, mix and match shares. Nobody else relevant down the bottom of that board. Forwards and centers, here we go. If you're not familiar with the site, gang, there's only a few people hanging out today. I expect it's mostly regulars. But if you stumbled your way in, if you're new, for one, hit the like, hit the little subscribe button down there. Helps me out quite a bit. Us out. Helps us grow the channel. Add more things to it as we go. But jump on the site, rotoscouts.com. If you're not familiar, NBA, NHL today, NFL playoffs coming up over the weekend. Every major sport, every main slate, every showdown slate for football. Or every individual showdown slate for football. I'm not doing like 17 individual showdown slates on full Sundays, but you get me. Access to everything, all sports, not a per sport fee, $1 a day or less. I don't know why I said $1 a day or less. It's always under $1 a day. Screwing up my own promo. So under $1 a day gives you access to everything. Baseball's right around the corner. We're 33 days from pitchers and catchers reporting. We're 80-something days from opening day. I'm going to try and add some season-long content for baseball. I think I'll be able to do it. No promises yet, but I think I'll be able to do it. If I do, it's included. If I don't complain. Let's get these forwards and centers knocked out. Oh, so yeah, the site was rotoscouts.com if I failed to mention that. acemine.io also, that's where these sims run. Check out acemine.io, promo code rotoscouts all in caps, 20% off your first month over there. I don't know why that's taking so long to sort. We'll just start talking. Robinson Earl, center only on FanDuel. He is pulling a 5.72 value score. He played 21 minutes last night. They're missing more people than they were. No Zion today. I don't love it. He's super cheap on DraftKings. That's why he's coming up. Game before that with no Zion, he played 10 minutes. But there's also no Trey Murphy now. There's a couple other question marks. Power forward and center eligibility for $3,000. We've got so many $3,000 guys on this DraftKings slate that the value's there. 6.91 is potential. Is that our? Hang on. I think it's our top overall value score. It is. 6.91 is our top overall value score. But we're actually only getting him 35% of the time over there. That's well above the field. But he absolutely is going to need every single one of those minutes to get anywhere near value. The good news, though, is if you do stumble into some shares, and again, 35%, it's not like he, even at these values, ran away with the slate because of how many good players we're going to get in those spots, because all the value that's at guard. So, like, you're getting 24% Giannis, and you certainly don't want him to block you out of Giannis shares. You're getting fair distribution around some big plays down this way. So, yeah, he's there. Yeah, we got him ahead of the field, but that only amounted to 35%, even though he was the top value guy of the day. And I could easily see those minutes slipping way down. Or just kind of a low-end performance. He's only been a 0.85 per minute guy. A lot of fragility in the Jeremiah Robinson Earl play. I'm so much happier that I play on FanDuel and I do not have to worry about him. Brandon Boston we talked about, but again, coming up 42% of the time, looking like a piece from New Orleans and potentially impact there if we get additional guys out. 33% of Tyrese Martin we already discussed briefly at the top of the show. Actually, no, we talked about him during guards as well. DeAndre Ayton, 30% on DraftKings. 6,200, that's a little bit just of a spend spot where I feel like those shares are coming up a little bit more just because we'll have money once we get to that position. Same deal with like $7,700 Zubac, who we got 21% of the time. Obviously, we'd rather have Giannis than either of those guys, even though both of them eclipse his value score. His ultimate ceiling is so far beyond either of those guys that it's not even funny. You got him 24% of the time, probably plenty of lineups with him alongside one or two of those guys, given the positional distributions and the util spot. And you can get one, actually you can get all four of them, right? If you go like forward, center, util, power forward. So you can have all four of those players if you want them. And they're all coming up as very interesting big men. I don't know how that would break down salary-wise, but I think you'd be fine. Right, what's that spend? Across four spots, that's a $28,000 spend? So it's a little over half. With all those guard values not yet accounted for. You can build that core of bigs and then jump over to, and again, I know I'm including Jeremiah Robinson Earl, and it's not like we're talking about the best player in the world there, but you're getting Ayton, Giannis, and Zubac. And then you're adding in two of those value guards, and then you're buying another like star caliber forward. Works for me. Powell, we've talked about a little bit already. He's got guard eligibility on both sites, but again, 20% a little bit below the field there, 30% a little bit below the field on FanDuel. That's essentially where we were on James Harden as well. Either player, plenty. I'm happy with plenty. I'm happy with being around these numbers, but I'm also happy being a little bit below the field on those. Denny, if he goes, does look slate relevant on both sites. Played 30 minutes the other day, put up a 25-3. I've got him for more minutes. We've seen him play more minutes in recent games. 5.31 value on the FanDuel scale. We're getting him a little bit below the field despite having 30% of them in our pocket. Oops, 31%. 5.48 value score. 20% on DraftKings. That's a little above the field. Different situation across sites. Basically the same value. No. He's more valuable on FanDuel. 5.48 is above our FanDuel value. 5.30 technically a little below our DraftKings value. But we're getting more of him on DK relative to the field. Probably a spot filler a little bit. Where again, we're just going to have money to spend. So some of these 60, high sixes, mid sevens types that a lot of the time fall off the board without value land in lineups today. Dort, yet another guy. Oh no, he was on the other board. I was going to say yet another guy from OKC, but he's one of the ones we talked about. Hartenstein, an actually high-priced player from OKC. 7,100, appropriate. He's excellent. 1.22 per minute on DK. We got him basically level with the field at 17%. Just the matchup against the Cleveland bigs, like he's seen them before. This is not a new situation for him. He's very good and good enough to stack up against those guys. But it is a challenging spot for him to go out there and have like a ceiling game for what he does. But definitely playable. I'd probably look to be more in like this kind of a trajectory against the field, slightly below maybe than dead even. So maybe you're dropping down to like 12, 15 instead of 17 on DraftKings and just spend those right up here. You've got obvious names to spend them on right up there. I think that would be a reasonable pivot on DK. Just because, again, rather have a position and given the matchup, given the challenges of that spot with so many other good options on the board, much as I love Hartenstein, I think it does make more sense to be slightly below the field while still having a chunk. Siakam going to pick up a little bit, I assume. I haven't checked the rates, but I assume there'll be a little bit of an uptick. No Turner. Looking okay already, 14%. FanDuel, 16%. This was essentially is who he is kind of a spot. He'll gain some ground. Harrison Barnes looking highly playable. More interesting to me, I think, than Caleb Martin. Getting 0.71 out of Caleb Martin, 0.66 out of Harrison Barnes on FanDuel. They're closer together on DraftKings. You got them exposed exactly the same on DraftKings, but it's a big undercut on Caleb Martin's exposure while being level with the field on Harrison Barnes' exposure for 1,100 less. So to me, I think I can take more of these and put them into this and then take that $1,100 and spend it on something better. Considering that you're getting a better value score out of Harrison Barnes. You're getting essentially the same per minute production on essentially the same usage. Harrison Barnes is it's not as extreme a situation as what Caleb Martin is in for Philly as far as missing teammates. But Harrison Barnes has some missing guys supporting his upside here. And he's cheap. It is just yet another $3,800 guy on DraftKings to a degree. And he probably just kind of competes with those OKC guys, the Lou Dorts of the world, the Casey Wallaces of the world. And in a raw sense, those guys are better NBA players than him. If I had to go win an NBA game, would I pick one of those two or Harrison Barnes? I would pick either of those two over Harrison Barnes. But in a DFS value sense, this is a really interesting little inflection point. And again, considering how, and don't get me wrong, Caleb Martin is above slightly our value threshold on DraftKings. He is a playable spot. He does not look bad. But since we got him below the field, kick that down further. Make that 8%. Sink those shares in here. Now you build a position on the Barnes play. You're above the field a little bit on Barnes. And you've got more money to spend in every single one of those lineups that you made that pivot. I think that's a really interesting DK spot. Again, it's funny to get that into it when all of this is on the board and all those guards are. That could be a much more interesting spot on other days. You could also run a version of this slate where you get to neither of those guys and it does not matter. Just given how broad this slate is for these values. So bear that in mind. Lillard downgraded to questionable. Drummond now doubtful. Yabu starting at the 5. Yeah, Power, we got the Hallie Turner news. Appreciate it though. Oh, maybe that was from before. That was from before. So thank you for it. Yeah, Powell was a high-end play. He's up here. We got him a little bit lighter than the field on both, but we got him quite a bit, and you could definitely take more than this. But as usual, what I was saying about it, I just don't love the idea of now I'm grabbing more just to get back to the field, where there are more advantageous plays against the field. But yes, totally playable and well worth it. Aaron Wiggins, let me guess, 3,200 on DraftKings. 12%. 23 minutes projected. Plays around 20 a night on average, but has seen a few additional minutes. Played really well in the fourth quarter against my Knicks the other day. He's playable at worst given the low price on DraftKings, but again, there's so much of it. Take it or leave it. If he lands in some lineups and he is that value square in some of your DraftKings lineups, totally fine. Small forward, power forward. So like if he replaces $3,000 Jeremiah Robinson Earl in some lineups, go for it. No issues with it. It's just not like a standout play, given, again, just the absurd abundance of $3,000 guys on DraftKings today. Patty Williams, kind of interesting on FanDuel, 32%, a solid 5.62 value score. He's eclipsing the value of a lot of guys above him, considering that we're sorted by DK. That makes sense. 32%. Yeah, he's one of our more highly exposed FanDuel forwards if we resorted by the FanDuel slate. 45 over 30 minutes as a 0.78 per minute player. It's reasonable. He's a little bit higher usage than some of like the OKC types. The Caleb Martins of the world, the Harrison Barneses of the world as well. As at worst, like a mixer with Wiggins, Barnes, Caleb Martin, I don't mind getting to some Patty Williams. Again, just that game environment, super appealing. So whatever I can grab out of that one. And if he's coming up strong like that and showing that much value, that's a good option. On DraftKings, he's there. He's above our value threshold, but he's fallen off the board a little bit. He's 45 over there. And considering, again, the abundance of $3,000 guys, you just don't need the 45. The 45 is kind of a detriment. But we did get him, 11% below the field. Ben Mathurin, mix and match piece. Now that we know that Hallie's in, he might see a little bit of a rate uptick with no Turner out there. I got to check just, that does, again, void shots for whatever Turner takes. But I don't think it's going to be as dramatic an impact as if Hallie had been out. But he's playable. 8% FanDuel, 9% DraftKings. Below the field on both. Showing more value at 5.28 on DK than he is at 4.88 on FanDuel. Herb Jones kind of in that territory as well. 12%. He's a 5+ value on FanDuel. It's what we're looking for, but just not super relevant at 57 both forward spots. 53 both forward spots on DraftKings. 7%. Super playable. Missing bodies in New Orleans. Good player. Reasonable per minute numbers who spikes upside through non-projectable ways via collection of fantasy points in some sense, via defense in some sense. Not non-projectable, but less projectable. Here's Jokic if he goes. We did get him 7% on DraftKings. That's below the field. It's the same exposure that we got on Wemby. A healthy Wemby showing a slightly better value score at 11.5 versus a ailing Nikola Jokic. He's only sick. He's not hurt, but he's sick. That's why he missed yesterday. 12.7. I could see the argument to be made. It's kind of the same thing as that situation. Since we got him the same, since Jokic is coming up lighter, you could conceivably take those Jokic shares, sink them into a bigger Wemby investment, zero out Jokic, roll with it, and play it that way, because that is a better value from a comparable per minute guy. As bizarre as that is to say, Wemby is a comparable per minute guy for Jokic. Very few are, but he's there. So given the price offset on DraftKings, I don't mind that move. On FanDuel, they're both in the 12s. Neither is a 5 value score, but both are on the crest of 5. We got Wemby at 8%. He's got power forward eligibility. It's probably making some difference for him. We got 0 shares of Jokic. I don't love that. And I said 0 out Jokic, but what I really meant was have a few shares. I never want no Jokic on a slate. He's just too good. But I think between the two, given the lower pricing, particularly on DraftKings, and how they landed in the sim, give me Wemby. Turner, we're skipping over. He wasn't really coming up all that relevant anyway. Mix and match shares on all these guys. You've got a collection of mid-6s, 5s, and yet another handful of $3,000 guys. Peyton Watson, Derek Jones, Amir Coffey, all playing mid-20s to upper 20s minutes, all reasonably competent players. Mid, 0.7s from most of those guys, 7.7, 7.6, 7.0. But those are essentially the same minutes and same rates that a lot of these guys are coming up with. They're just slightly more expensive. They're just more in are who they are situations where these guys get the benefit of a little bit of change situation around them. But could any one of these $3,000 guys succeed in place of any one of those $3,000 guys? Yes. 22% Tobias Harris. I never loved that. 0.89 per minute. Fine. I'll take what I get of him, but I would like to have that number be lower than 22%. 15 and a little bit of an undercut to the field, maybe like a yellow down angle from the field would be a little bit more appropriate in my mind. But I'll take him. He is a 5+ value. There's plenty to do for everybody on Detroit right now. Jalen Williams, I like a whole hell of a lot better than the Tobias Harris shares in the 20s. We're level with the field here. If I could somehow sacrifice these as part of my way to get to more Jalen and build a plus position on Jalen while getting to a minus position on Tobias Harris, and obviously you'd be making a change at another spot to enable that, I think that's worth doing. Jalen on the OKC side, though, going to run into some of that issue that Hartenstein's going to run into as far as the Cleveland Bigs. It's going to be a very interesting collision across that entire game. Really looking forward to it. Mobley showing 10% on the other side of that same exact situation. On DraftKings, we got 4% of both of those guys. 83.79, 5+ values. I don't mind a few additional shares of either one, but you'd still be in the single digits. What I think I would probably look to do is pick which side of that you want to be on, because the math is essentially the same. There are minor differences between the two plays. 7,900, you're getting a little bit more out of Mobley for value, and you've got the multi-position eligibility, but let's call them equal. I would probably, rather than trying to kick them both to the field, I'd probably get less of one, more of the other, and try and build a plus position on one and a minus position on the other. Even though we're coming up minus on both slightly, since it's single-digit ownership, that should be doable. I think that's how I would approach that situation. Or you just play it like this and take, under the field on both. That's if you want to get above on one, or like if you're looking for more shares of one, do it for one, not both. 22% of Clowney on FanDuel, 3% on DraftKings. He's 43 on FanDuel. That's a more impactful price on the FanDuel slate than his 4,400 is on DraftKings. That is still a 5.4 value score on DK. We're looking for 5.5, but 5.41 is damn close. A lot of other days he'd be, this territory. He's all the way down here, given how stupid this slate is. Jalen Wilson, 18% FanDuel, 1% DraftKings. It's the exact same thing. 4,500 small forward, power forward. He's a 5.3 value. You'd see more of them on normal slates. This is not a normal slate. 5.5 value score on FanDuel. We got him 18% of the time. Do I love Jalen Wilson? No. He's a terrible low-end 0.61 per minute guy. There's just a lot for everybody on Brooklyn to do right now. Nick Claxton, 5.35 value. Day'Ron Sharpe. There's a lot for all three of these guys in particular to do on Brooklyn. Again, Brooklyn right now, no, I got to find the starting point. That's how long this goddamn list is. No Bojan, no Cam Johnson, no Cam Thomas, no Max Lewis, no DeAnthony Melton, no D'Angelo Russell now, no Ben Simmons unless he miraculously went from doubtful to playing. No Trent Watford. This team is just completely depleted. And it just leaves us with these terrible options. But a couple of them are going to succeed. I wish I could project Day'Ron Sharpe to play more minutes, because he's the best per minute guy that they've got at 116. But he's just not going to play the minutes. He could still get there. He played 22 minutes the other day, or call it 22 and a half. I've got him at 21 today. Maybe you could argue for another minute. He put up 39.1 FanDuel points in that game. He's a 116 player this year. 124 last year. So don't ignore Day'Ron just because he's only playing 21, 22 minutes. But if he could manage to play 28, he'd be Nas. It would be that kind of a play. Vooch, mix and match piece on DraftKings at 1%, 8,700 over there. 12% exposed on FanDuel, one of the better center options, 5.21. Again, super appealing game environment. Now he doesn't have to play against Miles Turner. I don't mind that. Onesie, twosie shares of everybody on this list. Kispert, Jakob Poeltl, Sean George. Josh Hart coming up a little bit more on FanDuel than he did on DraftKings, but not really looking all that relevant on either site. 8,000 now. If there's no cat, if there's no deuce, then that goes up. Again, Hart and OG specifically go up, as do Jalen, just situationally, and Mikal Bridges in that spot. And then whoever starts if there's no cat. But right now, not looking super critical. Joe Val, Levine, mix and match plays, onesie, twosie shares on both sites. Timmy Hardaway, I just never really need at 0.56 per minute on FanDuel, 0.60 per minute on DraftKings. Koulibaly, Sarr, there's still a lot of impact to come for Washington. Sarr's questionable, Kuzma's questionable, Bub's questionable. At least as of the last time, at least of when we started this show. So a lot could change around Koulibaly. A lot could change around Sarr. A lot could change around Champagny. RJ, not really looking like a piece on either side, much as we were getting quickly. At 81, not really getting RJ. Projected for his essentially full rates. He's playing at 1.20 on FanDuel, 1.25 per minute on DraftKings. I really didn't ding him that much, and I think the price has just gone up to the point where it's just a little bit limiting for him. So no shares on either side. Wouldn't shock me, though, if RJ went out and played a very good game today. put up at least a somewhat relevant score. But I think where he's fallen off completely is, one, we're well below our value thresholds on both sites given that price. But we've also just got so many good options that, we're going to be here today. We're not going to play that much out of here outside of the spot filler guys who come up as just much better values. So like I said, we are getting some abundance of the $6,000 and $7,000 guys, but we're not getting a lot of the 8s that don't show that value score. They're getting boxed out by the low values, the high-end superstars, and then just better mid-range guys. A couple onesie-twosie guys to round things out down the board here. 2% of Jalen Duren, OG Anunoby at 2%. Mix and match plays both. Unless things change, nothing else coming up. Just a dozen people here wrapping up the show with me. I appreciate all of you guys who hang tough through the end of the show. I know that a lot of people go in and out and jump from one show to the next and listen to what they can. Really appreciate everybody who comes through. If you're new here, check out rotoscouts.com. Everything is under $1 a day. No per sport nonsense. Trying to be the most economical game in town. Give you guys the best bang for your buck while giving you the highest end possible projections that compete with all the big sites that charge hundreds and hundreds of dollars for these things per sport every month. So check it out. Give Roto Scouts a little love if you can. Give Ace Mind a little love. With that in mind, absolutely love all you guys. If you hit something, tweet it at me. Drop it into the Discord. Not for marketing purposes. I don't care. I mean, I do, but I'm not looking for it for marketing purposes. I like seeing when you guys win. When I don't have a good night, it makes me feel good that one of you guys did. So share those wins with me, guys. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll be back tomorrow for more. See you.